If you asked me when I started having guests on, who's one of the 5 people you'd want to have on my list, there would be Robert Greene, the author of The 48 Laws of Power. And today I'm actually going to get to talk to him. So excited for it. New York Times best-selling author. His books are timeless. 1,000 years in the past, 1,000 years in the future. His books will still be meaningful. So excited to talk to him. Robert Greene, let's go. All right, what's up, everybody? And welcome back to the Sean Lowery Show. I have with me today Robert Greene. Robert, how are you?
I'm fine, Sean. Thanks for having me.
I know you just had surgery. I'm glad to hear you're feeling better. And I am so excited to talk to you. When I first started my podcast, I would probably say you're one of the top 5 people I'd want to have on. And I know you get praise all the time, but I've basically studied your work. And I know when you were on a Whitney Cummings podcast, she cried. I might not cry. I'm sorry if I'm not crying. It doesn't mean I'm not excited.
Okay.
But I love your books. Timeless, evergreen content, refreshingly true, and kind of, a little dark, which I love because, I'm a nice guy, but these books, they gave me so many tools for starting and growing my business. And I love the format of your books too. Just the way that they're like lists. There must be some power in like people learning through lists, like the 48 Laws of Power, 33 Strategies of War, broken down into 5 parts. In my books, I have notes in the margins, and I can't tell you how excited I've been to talk to you. There's so many things I wanted to ask you about, but I kind of broke it down, and I couldn't ask everything I was thinking of because there's so many different topics you cover.
Okay.
All right. So 48 Laws of Power. I've done a podcast about it before. One of my favorite books ever. My first thing is I know it's big in the rap community. Why do you think it is so big in the hip hop community?
Well, it came out in 1998, and it sort of fit into the zeitgeist at the time, in hip hop at least, where a lot of Black musicians and their managers were trying to get away from the traditional relationship among Black musicians, where they traditionally did a lot of the creative work, but they never got a fair share of the money. They were just incredibly exploited. And so a lot of them were looking to own their own music and to start their own businesses and to not, to get out of that kind of unfair relationship. So the 48 Laws of Power came out at a time where they were very curious about the power game, because of all the industries in the world, I mean, we could rate shark industries by their sharkiness. So Hollywood would rate very high up on the shark scale, and politics would rate somewhere pretty high as well, and sports. The music industry is like up here. It's the sharkiest, most Machiavellian environment you can find. And, I later did a book with 50 Cent, and he explained to me that, he'd obviously seen and suffered everything on the streets of Southside Queens where he grew up. He was a crack dealer, and it's all kinds of violence. He was shot. He said nothing prepared him for the power games in the music industry. So for him, the book was like a template that he could use that could help him navigate that kind of environment. And it was a book that was very honest and straightforward. I compare it to getting your shot of whiskey straight up. There's no water, there's no dilution. It's a straight, heavy shot, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I think hip hop artists appreciate that. And, I've since become friends, I'm not name dropping, but with other rappers like Drake. And they've all explained the same thing, this business I'm in, it's just so intense. It's so manipulative. And, my books would help them a lot. So I think it came out at the right time, but it's also, I think it appeals to any kind of entrepreneur that wants to basically own their own business and not be dependent on other people. And nobody in the past was more dependent than Black artists and musicians.
I love that. And not only is the advice good, but also the style, like you said, a straight shot. That's very similar to rap, where they just kind of say this and that, like hardcore. Are you familiar with Kanye West?
Sure.
He's one of my favorite people. I'm fascinated by him. And all right, so I have 7 laws here that I think he, from the 48 Laws of Power, that I think he perfectly kind of exemplifies. So he has number 6, court attention at all costs. 28,
Obviously.
enter actions with boldness. 25, which is recreate yourself. He had like the old Kanye, the new Kanye, the religious thing that he's doing now. Raise your value through absence and scarcity, which is one of my favorite laws, because he'll go on Twitter for like 8 months and then he'll be off for 8 months.
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
I know. And then keep others in suspended terror, the art of unpredictability. One of my other favorite ones. He says he's putting his album out, then he doesn't put it out, which is also kind of a principle from the Art of Seduction. Constantly kind of surprise people. That's who seduces people.
Right.
Be royal in your own fashion. He calls himself Jesus. Never appeared too perfect. He's kind of had the TMZ moments where he's talked about his pills and his divorces. Even create compelling spectacles. He was just at the Superdome in this little room, hiding, and had a countdown clock on the wall. He's crazy. And I want to see if you had an opinion on him and if you think he's read your work before.
Well, I know he's read my work. I've met him once at the VMA Awards when I was there with 50 back, like 07. And he was very nice, very charming. And I know he's read the books because he's quoted them in some of his songs. So yeah, he's a very interesting figure. I think, as you point out, I mean, the laws you picked were very good. He's very good at creating compelling spectacles. That would be sort of what ties it all together. He knows the art of drawing attention and then keeping it there, and always having something new on hand that surprises you, that's unexpected. And, a lot of people nowadays in social media, for example, in particular, have lost that sense of that art. They're too present. They're too in your face. They don't know how to withdraw, because to get people's attention, you also have to know how to withdraw yourself, how to be absent sometimes. So they think about you. So they fantasize about you. And the one thing about Kanye is people are always talking about him. They're always wondering, what's he up to? What's his latest move? What's behind it? What's really motivating him? Because he never quite reveals what is going on behind the curtain, what is really the driving force behind his music, the album, his next move in politics or whatever. So that's an art that he has that I think a lot of people could learn from. And it's very interesting that you pointed out those laws. I think you're right.
He did one political rally in his run for president. And it was actually, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. That's where I live.
Oh.
And I went to it. I was one of 800 people. No, it was 200 people that were there for the event. And it was so funny to watch how the media covered it versus how it actually was. I will say it was very weird, but everyone in the room had their eyes up there oh my God, he's a fascinating character. And
what did he talk about? What was he like?
So he came out and he had a bulletproof vest on, which was kind of odd. It was during quarantine time. It was kind of just coming out of it. It was a small crowd. And first thing he said was, if I'm not on the board of Adidas by tomorrow, then I'm not going to put out another shoe with them. Now, none of the media picked that up. He was making a demand, and I don't think he's still on the board, but I think that's what he wanted the headline to be. That one didn't get picked up. Then he had a couple of people come on stage and ask questions about gay rights and abortion, some stuff like that. He kind of rambled on about it. But then he had this moment where he started crying, bawling his eyes out, because he was thinking about the thought of possibly, he had his first daughter, North, with Kim Kardashian, and they considered possibly getting an abortion. They didn't do it. They considered it. And just the thought of it made him start crying and crying. And it was really touching because he's very much pro life, I guess. And that was the story that came out in the news. And that was the first time he ever addressed it. It was very embarrassing, I guess, for Kim. But he was raw. He was raw when he was there. And
yeah. Well, that's definitely one of his primary qualities. I've noticed it as well. And that can be very powerful in a way. I mean, and I talk about that in my last book, The Laws of Human Nature and The Art of Seduction, because it gives somebody a real aura of authenticity. He doesn't seem to be someone who's playing a role. He really is who he is. And I think people like musicians and rock stars and artists are given license to kind of play out their fuller selves, and including their dark side in the public realm, as long as they appear very authentic, that it's not like a game that they're playing. So,
Right.
and I got that impression when I met him, that there was something kind of raw and on the edge about him, that, you know, there was very an intensity that a lot of people don't have. And I found that very interesting. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And that's the keeping people, cultivating the air of unpredictability. Like I think
That's right.
naturally just does that. He's a wild dude. One of my favorites, and that's cool that you know that he definitely read the book. So I have another law that I'm interested in, and it's 39, stir up waters to catch fish, right? And I have a specific news story. It was probably my favorite news story over the past couple of years, as far as how fascinating it was. And tell me if you're familiar with the story of Jussie Smollett.
Who?
His name's Jussie Smollett, and he basically faked.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, he faked an attack.
Oh, in Chicago.
Yes, in Chicago, 2 a.m. Faked an attack that he said Trump supporters were beating him up, and it turns out he like faked the whole thing. I was like kind of blown away because that story was going on. I was paying attention, and I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that this happened to him!" Like, and he went on a national TV show and was very. He wasn't confused. He was lying. He was made up a fake event in order to gain sympathy with the public. And I was wondering if that was along the lines of, courting attention or stirring up waters to catch fish. Like, what does that say about him, human nature, the laws of power? Someone would go that far to be a victim, to kind of raise their own stature.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the new environment that we live in, and it's what social media allows for. So, 50 years ago or 30 years ago, before we had anything like this, to get attention on a national scale like this gentleman did, or other people, was not very easy, right? I mean, you had to really create a splash to get in the national newspapers, etc. And but now we live in this world where, just through a few simple maneuvers, a few simple manipulations, you can reach audiences of millions of people worldwide. It's insane. It's the kind of power that a king or a queen 400 years ago could never even begin to dream of. Right. So it's not very difficult to kind of stir the waters right now, because people, if you study human nature like I did, I wrote a almost 600-page book on the damn subject.
Yeah.
We have a negative bias towards our emotions. We're attracted to things that have a negative sheen to it. So if somebody does something that seems kind of unfair or that stirs our outrage, we're compelled to read it. We like reading about tragedies. We like reading about disasters. We're not so much drawn to good, cheerful, positive, wonderful, heartwarming stories. I'm afraid that's a quality in human nature. And so social media, the internet, is just this incredible machine for generating a lot of these negative emotions, for always feeling outraged and angry. And just with a few tricks, just a few little triggers, you can get millions of people paying attention to you. It's very powerful in a marketing sense, and it can be very dangerous because it can blow up in your face if it comes out not to be true.
Yes.
But, when something is invented that has that amount of power contained in it, which social media has, for human beings that don't have a great deal of self-control, and let's admit we're not a creature that has a great deal of awareness or self-control, these things can become incredibly dangerous. And we're seeing some of that now.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he wanted to be a victim, because, I mean, in the 50th law, you read about fearlessness and the power of the positive attitude. Like, being a victim is not a great trait, but it does play well on social media. And he had a political angle. And I just can't believe he did that big of a stunt to get that attention. Like, I can understand if something happens to you and then you try to frame it in another way. But this guy, to do that, I was fascinated by it. Like, how many other things have been faked? Like, I don't know. Like, tell me if you think this would work with the 48 Laws of Power. Like, if a president, I'm just making this up, if they faked an assassination attempt before an election to get sympathy, like that, assuming they don't get caught, that would probably be effective, right?
It's happened before. It happened in the 1950s. There's a French president in the 80s named Francois Mitterrand, the socialist. And in the 50s, his career, I believe it was in the 50s, maybe the 60s, his career wasn't going very well. He faked this assassination attempt on him that just suddenly made him very popular and very well known. And then there was a famous case in Italy, I hope I get the names right, where a man faked his own kidnapping to sort of get a lot of media attention. And then it came out later that it was all kind of, a game that he was playing. And so people have done that before in the past. And it's worth questioning sometimes. Yeah.
Do you remember with these two instances, like how long after people found out about it? Was it years later?
The Mitterrand, it's not even really well known that it happened, and it didn't come out until I think the 90s or the 2000s.
Okay, so it worked. It worked.
Yeah, and then I believe it was the Aldo Mori story in Italy. I hope I'm not wrong. It was in the late 70s. And even then, some people still didn't believe that it was faked, and it took a long time for it to kind of filter through. So they did essentially get away with it. And trust me, Sean, there are other examples of people doing something similar, a kidnapping, an assassination attempt, something like that to garner any kind of sympathy.
Wow. And that's such a powerful thing that, like, by reading your work, you can kind of understand that and question it to a reasonable amount if it happens, but also, like, if you have the balls to actively do something like that, that's kind of dark, that has a good benefit for you. Not saying it's good, right? But it could work. It could work, which is kind of like the whole thing with you. It's like this. I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, but it's effective with humans. And that's wild. Are there any other?
There are plenty of other there are other examples. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, like, anything modern, like modern examples of any of the laws that, like, kind of stick out to you. Like, when you are watching the news, do you, like, see some stories and you're like, they're using this law, they're using this law? Do you think like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, Trump, when he was president, he was definitely using some of the laws.
Oh, yeah.
He was courting attention at all cost. He was kind of, in his own strangely demonic way, he was brilliant at that. Because you would go, at the time I was traveling around the world, and people in the far corners of the planet were obsessed with him, either hating him, most of them hated him, some people loving him, but nobody could ignore him. He was also very good at the unpredictable law, creating suspended terror. In fact, he consciously used that. He knew that he was doing that in the public eye. People like Elon Musk are really clever with these kind of laws. Anybody, because nowadays, so, Elon Musk, look at him and look at his Tesla. His companies aren't necessarily on paper performing very well, right? If you look at the quarterly reports, I mean, they're starting to generate some money, but it's kind of a facade, right? And hardcore investors were all actually trying to short him because they didn't really believe it. But then he's so good at the publicity angle, the marketing side, of creating this myth, this aura that he's larger than life, that he's this person he's interaction with boldness. He always is doing that, create compelling spectacles, on and on and on. And by virtue of that, he's able to get a lot of investors investing in his company, which gives him a lot of capital, which then gives him the room to kind of not be performing so well. So the kind of smoke and mirrors that he's using is actually extremely effective. And in the end, maybe he'll be able to turn around the company. Yeah. But a lot of high-level entrepreneurs in the world today, it's all about creating this aura of power and invincibility, which is how a lot of tech companies get ahead, because they're actually paper tigers. They're not really, there's not much there, but they're able to create the publicity and the hype and the spin that gets people excited about them. Yeah, every day when I open the newspaper or surf online, I'm seeing examples of the laws. And believe me, never outshine the master. Law number one, I'm seeing over and over and over again.
Where are you seeing that one?
Well, God, I don't know if I can, if examples can come immediately to mind.
Okay.
I know, for example, that in some ways, Biden and Obama have that kind of relationship a little bit. Because when Biden was vice president,
he never outshined the master, I would say.
No, he never did. He was very good at that.
Right.
But then when in his new president, when he became president, and he was suddenly, Obama was like in the shadows, and Biden was now initially getting a lot of attention, and people were very positive about him. There was a little bit of that tension, like my former underling is now kind of outshining me. That's a little bit different. I remember back, this is before people remember, but in New York City, when I lived there, Giuliani was the mayor, and there was a police chief named Bratton, who since became the police chief of LA. He's no longer here anymore. But anyway, he was getting so much attention for what he was doing for crime in New York that Giuliani was getting very insecure and upset about him, and he fired him essentially. And there was a lot of that kind of going on in the Trump administration. Anybody who was getting attention at the expense of Trump would somehow find themselves kind of marginalized or even fired. There were many examples of that.
Yeah. Never outshine the master. I always think that's interesting because in Mastery, you write about eventually you want to be better than your mentor, but you got to do it in the right way and understand that not to do it too fast, right?
Right.
Wow. Yeah. And Trump with the laws, like he cultivated the attention, of course, courted the attention. I think that is kind of maybe what lost it for him though in the second time around, because people were sick of it. People were sick of it.
I think so. He didn't know how to withdraw. He didn't know the art. So, for example, one of President FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he was kind of a master at this because he won 4 elections. No one's ever won so many elections. But he always said that if I start campaigning too early, and back in those days, too early meant like in May, right. A different world than now.
Right.
People are going to get sick of me, But if I don't start campaigning, if they don't hear anything from me until August, well, then they're going to start paying attention, and I can keep the momentum all the way to November. So he was an artist in that. When he became president, he was first elected in 32. He disappeared for several months, and people were going, "What the hell's going on here? Where's he leading the country? This is terrible." They're getting all sorts of negative press. And suddenly he emerged out of nowhere like Superman, like 90 days later, with his New Deal and a list of everything he was going to accomplish. And people went gaga. It was an amazing publicity stunt. So knowing how to withdraw and create some absence so people are talking about you so they don't take you for granted is a powerful political tool. And I agree with you. I think Trump never was good at that, because this goes back to Machiavelli, my mentor, if you will, is people rise to power often based on a quality that they have, a certain strength that fits with the times. So Trump came in at a certain time that he kind of hit the zeitgeist, at least for 46% of the country. But
not a politician, right? Like that whole zeitgeist that was working.
Yep. And very fresh, very new, saying exactly what he felt, not caring, not being politically correct and everything. Okay, that's great. And that rises you to the top. But as Machiavelli said, often what rises you to the top is what ends up being your downfall, because you keep pressing on it, you keep using it, you keep being aggressive when times call for you to not be so aggressive, and you don't know how to adapt to circumstances, and you go too far, and it causes a fall in your popularity. So he only knew one thing. He only knew one gear, which is up, up, up. Energy, anger, outrage. But he didn't know how to dial it down at certain moments. If he did, he could probably still be president.
He probably could be. Absence and scarcity. Never did it. Never. Never, not for one day even. And geez, you think he would like be smart enough using these laws to get there, to be able to analyze and use the rules enough to like stay there and just step back a little bit. People are sick of talking about you. Like they just want to talk about sports or something else. Like you never allowed it to happen and lost because of it.
Yeah.
I know people who voted for him or voted for Biden just because they just didn't want to talk about politics anymore all the time.
I know.
I don't blame them.
It was refreshing. It was refreshing for so many months not to have to think about it or talk about it. So
it really was. I think people started getting smarter, more mentally healthy, thinking about cryptocurrency or just their own lives. I think it was healthy for everyone to stop thinking about it.
I agree.
He could have done it. Love that. Great examples. And I always look through everything through this prism now too, after reading your work, especially over the past week too, because I've been diving in. So, I mean, I've already read them all, but I've been recapping since having you on. So 33 strategies of war, right? So business, like that's my main thing. Like this is kind of like an entrepreneur-based podcast. I love business. I have my own company, 17 employees, and they always talk about like strategy, war strategy relates to business, and I'm always interested in that. So I do have one question about it for you, about defining enemies. Like defining enemies. That's the first part of the 33 strategies of war. And I think that the quote is, once you have them in your sights, inwardly declare war. You cannot swing a sword without knowing what to hit with it. It's you against the world, it's you against the world and it's you against yourself. So like defining the enemy is so important, right? I get that and I understand that, especially in war. I sometimes have trouble with that, like in business, because like business is not a zero-sum game like war. Like Coke and Pepsi can both exist and have a share of the market. Like, how important is it for a business specifically to have an enemy for the leader, for the organization? Should people manufacture it or?
Well, I guess I disagree with you here. This is the first time I'm going to disagree with you. I do think business is largely zero sum. I mean, Coke and Pepsi, you know, they still are rivals and they're still trying to beat the other one and get bigger market share. But if a smaller rival suddenly emerged that was threatening either one of them, you better believe that they would do whatever they could do to destroy it. And that's the dynamic in tech business. Law number 16, crush your enemy totally, right? So, you know, how does Google or Microsoft or Amazon operate? Whenever any kind of new bit of technology, a new startup emerges that seems hot, that has something that could be very popular, it could be the next hot thing in the coming years, what do? They buy it out. That's a form of warfare. That's a form of annihilating your rivals, your enemies. You need that kind of edge. You need to not get complacent in this world. If you think that everybody loves you, that your product is so great that I just have to market it and everything's going to go great and hunky-dory, you're setting yourself up for a massive failure. You need to keep that edge, that competitive raw spirit that goes, there are people out there, I make one wrong move, they're going to eat me alive. They're going to push me off to the side. And in social media, if you, Sean Lowery, one day said one little thing on air that caused, you know, a ripple on Twitter, you're going to be canceled. You're going to be destroyed. So you don't tell me that it's not zero sum. Don't tell me that the stakes aren't high. Don't tell me that at any minute now somebody could come out of the woodwork and push you away. You know, there are plenty of rivals out there. The podcast world is like saturated now. It's kind of one reason I've been offered to have my own, and I'm kind of, oh God, another podcast in this world. You know, there are too many of them, right?
Agreed.
And so, how do you sort of stand out from the crowd? How do you not become one of the millions of other podcasts out there?
Yeah.
You know, and there's always going to be someone that's going to replace you with something that's going to be hot. You're only hot for a few months or a few years, and then it's finished. So the idea about the polarity strategy, about having an enemy, it's more a mental game. It's more psychological.
Love it.
It's for you to keep your edge. It's for you to have your eyes alert, because you know when there's a threat in the world, when there's somebody literally trying to hurt your business or whatever, you suddenly become much more creative, much more active, much more alert. You need to sort of generate that. And that was strategy number 4 in the 33 strategies, perhaps the most important one of all, which is the death ground strategy, where you feel like you're on edge, where if you don't win this battle, you're finished, you're going to die. Get rich or die trying. That's kind of what it's about.
Wow.
So it's more about how, in fact, those first 4 chapters in 33 strategies, I call them about it's really about your mind, your mental frame, and how you go into battle. Because how your mental frame of mind will determine your success or failure in any kind of competitive environment.
Wow. That's incredible. So like, just because my clothing company doesn't like have a direct competitor who we think about every day and they do something, we do something, it's not about that. It's about being in the frame of mind that you're going to get something taken away from you tomorrow. Like, let's go like that. Oh, I love that. I love that. That's so, takes so much like intensity, and it's easy to not think that way and be like, oh, we're fine. But that's where the problems come in if you start to think like that.
Yeah.
Wow. So you would essentially say, yes, manufacture an enemy, whether it be anything, just you need to find something
Or
to fight
the enemy
against.
the enemy could be yourself sometimes, you know? It could be your own negative qualities that keep getting in the way. I even say at some point in that book, declare war on yourself, declare war on all of your negative qualities, on your laziness, on your proclivity to procrastinate, on the fact that any kind of success tends to go to your head, on the fact that you're not alert, on the fact that you're not planning ahead. Go to war against all of those qualities as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. And in the podcast world, like at this point in my podcast, I'm one of the ones that someone might want to crush, because I'm younger, I'm getting started with it. But like another one of the things there is like, just keep going, right? Like kind of that's kind of part of it. Like I've had some with not a lot of views, like I might want to give up, but like that's part of the fighting back, and the intensity is right to keep going, like kind of no matter what the results are. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, in the boxing realm, great boxers always became famous by their rival, right?
Right.
So Muhammad Ali had Joe Frazier, among others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what made him great. And those fights were so intense that everybody had to watch. And it's what made him as famous as he was, and made him a better boxer. So your enemy, your rival, will actually up your game, if you will. They'll make you more intense.
Yeah.
It'll make you more competitive. It will make you look at the world with a sharper focus. So without any kind of enemy, without any kind of rival, this is human nature. This is who we are. We are this amazing animal that emerged as the most powerful creature on the planet by always being aware and alert and facing the dangers in our environment, because it made us more creative, right? You become more creative when you feel that kind of somebody's hot on your heels, and they're a threat to you. So it's more about the mental part of it, because I deal with a fair amount of athletes who come to me with issues and problems, and I've determined over the years, I mean, I'm not the first one to say this, that 98% of it is mental. Their problems dealing with management, dealing with the public, dealing with other players, dealing with the competitive environment. It's mostly in their heads. So that's the real war that you're playing. That's the real game.
Wow. So yeah, the enemy can be you. But that's so true. If you have someone nipping at your heels, the amount harder that you work goes way up. So like manufacture an organization, tell your employees like something that gets them like someone's coming for you. Let's go. That's just raises morale.
Or it can even be a crusade. So your team, your business, it's about something positive you want to do for the world, for the environment or whatever. Okay, so let's say it's the environment. Well, your enemy are all those companies that are like destroying the environment, fossil fuels, etc. Starbucks was very good at that back in the day, where Howard Schultz we're not just giving coffee. we're trying to change the world. I mean, it's kind of mostly bullshit, but we're trying to change the world. Well, who are we trying to change the world? Because we have enemies out there who are
Yes.
trying to exploit the environment. Okay. So you can also frame it as a crusade. And every time there's a crusade, there's most definitely an enemy that you're fighting against.
Right. Right. And that's in the book, more moral superiority. Like
That's
that's a
right.
great one. Oh, wow. That's good. I gotta go think about that and think how I can use that in my company. But I love that. Um, Crush your enemy totally. Law number 15. I feel like law number 47, right? Which is don't go past the mark you aim for, and victory, no one to stop. Is there like a little bit of like contradiction there, or does it depend how you apply it?
Oh, I misquoted myself. It's law 15, not 16. You're right. Um, well, people ask me that all the time. I mean, there are plenty
Yeah.
of laws, other examples like court attention at all cost, use absence to create honor and respect.
Yep.
There's a contradiction there. I tell people contradictions are fine. Nothing in life is ever consistent or simple, right? So if you're trying to be consistent, you're going to lose the power game. Circumstances are changing all the time. Life involves flux. So no two things ever happen the same way twice, right? So if you're thinking, I've got to court attention at all costs, no matter whatever happens, you're going to end up like Donald Trump and people are going to
Yep.
get tired of you,
Yep.
right? If you're always crushing your enemy totally, everyone's going to hate you and you're going to be like, get out of here. You're a madman. You're too aggressive. If you're always stopping in your wars, because you're afraid of hurting the other side, you're going to end up getting crushed by the other side eventually. So it's all about this balance. We were talking before about Machiavelli.
Yep.
He's the guiding spirit in the 48 laws. And he said, the single quality that's most important for a leader is flexibility, adaptability, the ability to adapt to circumstances. So you don't always use the same strategy. And at the end of each 48 laws of power, what is there? Shar, I'm asking you, what is at the end of every chapter?
At the end of every
Quizzing you.
chapter, a story, or at the end of every chapter, there is an example of something that is like not how this doesn't work.
Exactly, the
Okay.
reversal.
Yeah, the reversal. The
So at the end
reversal.
of every chapter, I say, don't use this law because it's going to blow up in your face, and here's how. So I'm trying to teach you I'm trying to school you in the art of strategy, that sometimes the thing that is most powerful is actually not going to work, right? So they're not contradicting their
Right.
other, they're trying to make you a little more alive to circumstances. So sometimes I got to crush that enemy totally, and other times I can't do that. So in war, we can see two examples. We crushed our enemy totally in World War I with the Treaty of Versailles. We humiliated Germany, and out of that emerged Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
Okay. In Operation Desert Storm,
Uh-huh.
1990, 1981, we go in to get rid of Saddam Hussein. We crush his army, but we leave him there. We don't crush him totally. And then for 10 years, he's driving us crazy
Mm.
until we have to like go in a war that we should never have done in the first place. We have to go in and clean up this mess. But if we had gotten rid of him in 1990, it would have been a whole different scenario. So those are two examples of show you the both sides there.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you went into that, because when I was prepping for this, I actually had a couple laws that contradict it. And as I was thinking it through, I kind of answered them myself. But that's why the last law, assume formlessness. Like you have to know when to use them, right? Like it's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah.
I love that. And so kind of the next thing I was kind of going to was mastery, right? When I first read it, it was probably like I didn't like it as much of 48 Laws of Power as much, because it was like a little different. But as I like kind of read it again and looked over it, like there's so much in there about like, yeah, mastery, becoming a master. And I love how it like you basically kind of explain like what genius is. Like through the current, it's the constant dialogue between your thoughts and reality. If we go into the process deeply enough, we come into contact with a theory that explains something far beyond the capability of our limited senses, like the interaction, thinking in your head. Like that's what greatness is. I kind of want to just ask you, like, all right, the combined intuition and reality. Can you just like kind of go into that? Just kind of talk about that, like from mastery.
Well, I think it's intuition and rationality is
What
basically
did I
it.
say?
You said reality, but that's all right.
I'm nervous.
That's okay. Don't worry. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Um,
Intuition and
well,
rationality.
well, okay. So, if you're too rational, right? If you're too kind of narrow in your thinking, if everything is kind of follows the same logic, right? You're always solving a problem. Go step A, B, C, D, I get there in this linear fashion. You're missing a whole wide range of possibilities. You're not exploring. Your mind is closed. But if you're too intuitive, so people have this impression that intuition is this kind of thing that like children have or primitive people. You intuit something about the world. It's not based on anything real. It's based on just a feeling. And feelings can often be wrong. We've often had that sensation where we intuited something, but it wasn't ended up being correct. But when you mix the two, when your thinking is both based on years of experience. So for 10, 20 years, you've been studying chess or music or a particular sport or architecture or whatever your field is, right? You have an incredible amount of knowledge in your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge that we could term as very rational, right? Very grounded in experience. And at that moment, there's the proverbial 10,000 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the proverbial 20,000 hours. At that time, your head is so crammed with all of these experiences that things come to you without you ever having to think. Ideas happen in an instant, in a flash. That is a different form of intuition than just the kind of woo-woo type of thing
Mm-hmm.
that might go on in spirituality or whatever. This is not based on a feeling. It is based on years of solid experience of learning and learning through failure and learning through success, through hardship, etc. And ideas just come to you out of nowhere. And it's not like something I'm inventing. You look at a chess master like Bobby Fischer,
Mm-hmm.
probably the greatest chess player ever in history, in the early 70s, and then he burned out. But he had played so many games, he had so many patterns of chess moves in his head that by the time he sat down to play, he could see the whole board as it played out in real time, like 50 moves in advance. He had things would come to him, moves that no one had ever thought of before because he had so much experience, right? That happens to musicians a lot, great
Mm-hmm.
jazz artists, etc. And we see it a lot in sports. So
Mm-hmm.
a great quarterback like a Joe Montana or a John Elway, they would talk about the fact that after so many plays, after being a quarterback, taking so many snaps, right, the game would slow down. They begin to see things that they had never seen before in the field. They began to anticipate. Well, they had a sense that the receiver was going to, on a particular route,
Mm-hmm.
right, was going to go this way, and they could anticipate exactly when to throw the pass. They knew that linebacker was going to suddenly move to the left and cause a problem. They could anticipate. They were seeing in real time what was going to happen in advance, right?
Yeah.
So great athletes talk about that all the time. Anybody who's ever reached a level of mastery, if you're writing a book, you're creating art, you're in business, you get a feeling like ideas come to you out of nowhere. You'll be in the shower, you'll be getting on the bus, you'll be getting in your car. You're not thinking about what your work is, and suddenly, whoa, this great solution came to you. And Einstein talked about that all the time. So it's a known phenomenon. And the point that we're talking about it is, it's an incredibly exciting feeling when you reach that point where ideas are coming out of nowhere. It's like a kind of a high, right? And I
Yeah.
explain in Mastery that you might have felt it yourself when you were in college or whatever, and you had a deadline, and it was
Oh
like
yeah.
the paper had to be in tomorrow or whatever. And
It's kind of
suddenly,
like that enemy. It's kind of like that enemy. Like it
yeah,
turns you
yeah,
on.
right. And suddenly things come to you that hadn't come to you in the weeks before because your mind is charged and the sense of,
Right.
like death or failure is looming
Uh-huh.
right there. So we've had that feeling before, but it's very exciting. The sense that you're
Yeah.
creatively expanding and you don't even have to try or to think. Things are coming to you without any effort. So I'm encouraging people to try and follow this process of mastery and at least aim for that because it's an incredibly powerful moment when you reach it.
And I love that term, like everything slows down. And the intuition that you're talking about is through, like you're right in the book, like the apprenticeship, the second stage. Like it's not something, oh, you feel like doing this, it's your intuition. No, it comes from going through the boredom, which I love that you talk about, the boredom of doing the same thing year after year after year. Like in my business, like every year I know, like it's only been 5-6 years. I know every August we're going to like expect these certain things. Like you do learn as you do it and you got to fight through it. But so you talk about fighting through boredom and then fighting through like fears and, things that go wrong, stick with it. And once you get past that, that's the mastery stage. And that is when that intuition kicks in. It doesn't just come.
Right.
For someone listening, thinking like, oh, I'm going to go with my intuition. Then like you have to become a master first, which takes hard work. Right?
Well, one of the greatest basketball players, at least one of the best white players in basketball, let's put it that way. I'm a big basketball fan, so I mean no disrespect by that. Was Bill Bradley, played for the New York Knicks in the 70s, mostly.
I think he was on the team with Phil Jackson. Is that right?
He was on the team.
Okay, all right.
He was a left-handed. I think he was a forward. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Anyway, Bradley loved basketball, but he was a white guy that couldn't jump very far. He had no natural gifts, but he loved the game. And so he went through this rigorous practice scenario where he taught himself. So he and his family would go on a cruise and he would bring his basketball with him. He was like 12 years old. And they had these incredibly long hallways on the cruise ship. And he would wear these glasses where they would block him being able to look down at the ground. Right? He could only look forward, and he would dribble for like 1,000 yards up and down these aisles, not being able to look down on the ground. Right? He would set up chairs in his dormitory in college where he'd have to learn without looking how to maneuver around all of these chairs, like they were men underneath fighting for a rebound, how to pivot, etc. The most boring exercises you can imagine.
No shooting, no dunks, no layups.
Yeah, but then Bill Bradley on the court after he went to Princeton and he became a Knick was like a magician. People were going, that guy has eyes on the back of his head. He would make this pass to Joe Frazier, the other guard on the Knicks, without even ever looking at him. How did he know what to do there? Like Magic Johnson was like that. Because from so much practice, he had a feel for the game that was on a much higher level, but it was based on years of the most boring, monotonous exercises you could ever imagine.
Wow. That's powerful. That's powerful. And I feel like that skill, that intuition, and now it's in a specific thing. Like for him, it was basketball. For certain people, like you said, music, like, and then when it comes down to one of the laws, like recreating yourself or something, like use your intuition to do that. Like it just makes you smarter. Like you're a master. And wow, that is, and it's so powerful.
It can happen in any field. It's going to happen to an entrepreneur. It happens to people who work with their hands, who build things, who design houses or actually make something with their hands, like a boat or anything. You get a feel for the wood. If you're a carpenter, you have a sense of what wood will work here or not. And when you pick up a particular board, the grain, the feel tells you so much because you've been so much experience. It's not just an intellectual thing. It comes with working with your hands. It comes with sports. It comes with any kind of activity. That's how the human brain is designed. That's that's the power that we can have if we tap into it.
And a lot of people get sick of it. Like one thing I think about a lot is, young entrepreneurs, everyone wants to have like, Elon Musk has a car company and a space company and a solar company. Like they want to do many different things. And I've always said, I like just stick to one thing and get good at it. Like if you're talking to a young entrepreneur, I'm assuming you might advise them to just kind of stick with the one thing.
Well, it depends. Everything is nuanced. Everything depends on who you are and your field. So one path to take in life that's very powerful, particularly now, is to develop several skills, right? Because we have a chance through education, through the internet, through all these opportunities to develop not just one skill, but skills in different areas, right? So one of the people I interviewed for Mastery was a guy named Paul Graham, who was one of the most successful entrepreneurs of our era. He started a business. He was one of the geniuses that led to any kind of internet sale on Netscape back in the 90s and Yahoo. And then he started a company called Y Combinator, which he sold for billions of dollars. Anyway, Paul Graham studied as a computer scientist first. He studied AI back in the 80s. He kind of got burnt out and he decided to become an artist. And he went to Italy and he studied painting, and he came back to New York, and he was this starving artist in the loft in New York City, but he was sort of enjoying it. And then he hears this ad on the radio that Netscape, or whatever it was back then, the new frontier was going to be able to sell things on the internet, right? But nobody knows how that'll ever happen. And suddenly he hears that, and something in his head clicks, and he goes, okay, I'm going to design that program. And it's going to be based not just on my years studying AI, but it's going to be based on also my art, because I learned a lot about aesthetics and what appeals to the eye and how the brain, navigates through certain spaces that you create in an artwork, and what is aesthetically pleasing. I'm going to create an experience when you go to buy something on Yahoo back then, whatever the hell it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Yahoo was what bought him out.
Okay.
That's pleasing. So it's not just, and this is where Steve Jobs was so brilliant. So mixing design and technology, the two skills, is what made him, put him on another level. So it's not a bad thing to learn several things, as long as you do it intensely, as long as you're not just kind of, putting your feet in different things because you're bored, you try for a year or 6 months. As long as you're intense and you master it over the course of years, and then you master something else, and then you combine them, you're really going to kick ass at that point.
So yeah, you can't just dip your toes in a bunch of different things, master multiple things, and then that can have an amplifying effect. But you can't, I feel like a lot of the times the young entrepreneurs who want to start a bunch of different companies, they're just not understanding the principles. They're just lazy, or they jump at the first sign of an obstacle, and they're not becoming masters.
Well, because they're into the trappings of success. They think it's going to be so exciting to get all this millions of dollars, all the girlfriends I'll have, all the attention, etc. But they're not paying it. They don't realize that anybody who's made it has put in hours and hours and hours of boring work. So we think of rock stars and musicians as being these like incredibly popular people who've just naturally gifted. But I was around 50 and I saw how hard that guy trained, how hard he practiced. You don't see all the practice that goes into becoming an Elon Musk. The education at Stanford, the years of failure, the beginnings with PayPal, all the steps in his career that allegedly led to where he is now. You're just seeing the glittering success that seduces you. Don't be fooled by the world. You're not going to get anywhere unless you put in the effort and the hours.
I love that. Don't be fooled. A lot of young people, but yeah, they're just not smart enough. So they got to learn that stuff, but it's hard work. And getting through like that boredom and all that stuff, I feel like that's where like a little bit of the positive attitude comes in. I know you talk about that in Mastery too. I like love positive attitude, because what alternative do you have? A negative attitude? If something bad happens, I think it's a 50 Cent said in the book. It was just like, no matter what happens to me, like good or bad, I'm going to make sure I turn it into a positive outcome. Like, I love that stuff. And I got so mad a little while back. Like, I was talking about that and someone said, oh, you're just like a toxic positivity. It's like a toxic thing. You're too positive. And I'm like, no, if I get stabbed in the heart, I'm not going to be like, oh, I love this knife in my heart. Like so I made a video and I was like, no, these are all the things that suck right now. Like, things are bad, but like, I'm just deciding to frame it in a positive light. Like that's really important too, right? To become a master of that positive attitude.
Let's say you get stabbed right here, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
It's bloody, it's painful, it's awful, but you're not dead, right? And then it's out, and then suddenly you're alive, and you came this close to dying, right? Wow! Suddenly life has a whole different tone to you. It's like, wow, I'm alive. Also, you've got incredible street cred now. Sean Lowery was stabbed here and he survived. And now everybody who watches you is like, wow, that guy's amazing, right? So,
Right.
50 got shot in the head 9 times and nearly died. And he turned that was turning shit into sugar because it gave him the most street cred of any rap artist ever. What other rap artist had 9 bullets in their head and survived? So
Right.
anything, unless it kills you,
Unless it
unless it
kills you.
can be framed in a way of it's not positive, it's that I can get some value from it. There's a good, my friend and former mentor, mentee, Ryan Holiday, he wrote a
Yes.
book called The Obstacle is the Way. So
Yep.
what hinders you, what hurts you, has a lesson that's going to make you stronger and more powerful. So people frame it as toxic positivity because that's their own problem. That's their own hang up. They've got issues themselves, right? I'm sorry, I have to say that, I'm being honest, right?
Of
And
course.
they're a negative person by spirit. They're kind of bitter or whatever, right? And this, I think they frame it as toxic positivity is their toxic negativity, because you can just
Yes.
as easily frame it as it's not positive. It's just learning. It's about getting stronger. It's about not being a weak person in this world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Like this sucks. This sucks, but it is what it is. We can't we don't have a time machine. So we got to like make the best of it. Like that's
right,
not toxic positivity. That's just the right way to think.
yeah,
And they're just like, oh, you're so annoying. Like all you ever do is just like say everything's going to be okay. Like, like that's your negativity. That's
yeah,
your negativity. That's self-sabotage. Like someone who's like that negative. And that was in the laws of human nature. Like I love
yeah,
that. Like your attitude shapes your situation. And that's like my favorite thing in the world. And I just think I love it because I don't know, I'm not the most naturally talented person in the world. So like I'm going to have to learn how to think and how to learn from situations and be positive as I get through them and deal with the boredom
yeah.
and all these things. Like and I love that you write about how you can change, you can continue to improve. Like that's
Yeah.
so big. And you didn't hit your success till what, 35?
Actually, I didn't get to start writing the 48 Laws of Power until I was 37, and it didn't come out
Okay.
until I was 39, basically. So, and it didn't have success right away. So you could almost say I was 40 until I had any success at all, you know?
And I heard
So
you
yeah,
say, like before you had your success, like you weren't as happy. Is that
yeah,
accurate?
I was pretty depressed because I'm an ambitious, competitive guy. I'm not going to deny it. It's not always a positive quality, but I was
Yeah.
frustrated because I felt like I should be somewhere much better in life. I knew I had something to say, but I hadn't discovered it. And the sense that you have potential and you're wasting it is one of the most depressing feelings in the world. Like, I have a talent. I don't know if it's great, but it's a talent nevertheless. But it's not finding its niche, it's not finding its audience. It was a very debilitating, depressing phase in my life. But I'm very, very lucky and I'm very, very grateful. And then not to play myself as a victim because I never do that. But 3 years ago, I had a stroke,
Mhm.
right? That's completely, I'm still feeling the terrible effects of it.
Yeah.
I can't, I can't really walk well. I can't do any of the exercise that I love, but I've had to channel my energies into something else. There's no time for complaining or feeling sorry. It's not going to help me at all. So I channel all of that into therapy, into learning about myself and seeing my own limitations. Now I can overcome them. I mean, whining and feeling sorry for yourself doesn't get you anywhere, right? So, you know, so
Yeah.
I haven't had it all easy. I've had to deal with like health issues and stuff, but everything is
Yeah.
a learning experience.
Yeah. And I mean, you're doing the best you can to, right, like frame it as a way to, yeah, be a positive thing, like something that you can overcome. You're still a very young man, I think. I mean, some people might think like, oh, 40s late to have success. I don't know. I've been framing myself to think that 40s fine. It's normal. It's a young. Like you. I mean, I know you said with the stroke, like can't exercise as much, but do you still feel like young, like a young person?
I do in my head. I'm still like
Okay.
I'm still a boy. I'm still a child, as my wife will explain. I haven't really matured emotionally that way, like a lot of guys are, haven't matured emotionally. So mentally, I'm young. Physically, I'm feeling a little bit of the wear and tear because my books take a lot out of me, and
Right.
the years, like the tires are beginning to show their, I forget the word, the threads on the treads
Yeah,
on
I know
them
what
are
you
a little
mean.
bit worn down. So the tires are beginning to like screech as we turn corners and things like that. But
We'll keep going. We'll keep going. I mean, you seem sharp as a tack.
all right, thank
And
you.
like I think that's even if I'm lying to myself, I think it's powerful to just always say like you're young no matter what, because it's
Oh,
like,
for
they
sure,
say
for
age is
sure,
a number. And
for
I believe
sure.
that. I
Totally,
believe
I
that.
totally agree. Totally agree.
I love that. All right, so the darkness, right, of the books, like it's something that I love. Like I have this like battle in my head all the time. Like everyone likes a nice guy. Like I have all my employees and stuff. Like I want to be nice. I want to be liked. I want to be kind. But like there's the reality of the situations, and it's like there's you wanted to tell someone something, but like it's mean to do it. Like nice versus mean. Like it frustrates me because I want to say the truth, but I'm trying to be nice, and all this stuff. How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's a great book. It's like, what's the point of saying something rude if it doesn't solve anything? But your books, like, they made me feel so much better about like just this is how it is. This is human nature, the darkness of it. Uh the 48 laws, like I think one of the worst, like most evil rules is like 37. It's no, sorry, it's earlier on. I think it's 4 or something. But let others do the work but take credit for it.
Law
Like
number
that one's
7.
7. It's early on. uh that one's crazy to me because it's so like everyone would agree that like that's dark. That's kind of like a bad. Right, like that's just on its face. All right, so here's my question. So you have that knowledge, and should you just embrace it and understand that that's true, and just kind of go with it and do those things? Or should you learn from your work, acknowledge the truth of it, but try to act differently in a better way? Like, what creates a better outcome for a person after learning all the information from your work?
Well, most people in this world are naive. So the sharks in the planet, on this planet, the people who are really, truly manipulative and great at the 48 laws of power, who don't need my book, by the way, I would estimate are about 5% of the population.
Okay.
And I think I'm being generous there. That
Yeah.
means that 95% of us, and in that 95%, I include myself, tend to be naive, tend to be innocent, tend to be too nice in this world. We enter the work world in our 20s and suddenly, whoa, is this what it's like? Did that person really do that? Is that really all the politics that have to go on? I wasn't prepared for this. They didn't teach me that in college. That's the position of most people. We're too nice, we're too naive. So the real function of the books, and I'm including, you know, 48 laws, human nature, seduction, etc., is to open your eyes to the full gamut of human possibilities of human behavior. There are aggressive types of people out there. There are passive aggressive types of people, and there's a lot of those. There are very manipulative people. There are people who are charming, but it's not real, right? And you are going to enter this world and you're going to trip all over your feet because you take people's smiling appearances, their niceness, etc., for the reality, when in fact they're not what they seem to be. And it's going to cause you a lot of heartache. It's going to cause you a lot of misery. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to blame yourself. You're going to have all this emotional baggage. It's going to weigh you down for years upon years, thinking that you're the problem. But if you open your eyes up and you learn that not all is rosy and sunny in the realm of human behavior, if you open yourself up to the possibility that some people might have a dark energy, they might not be what they seem, just that little awareness, that little click in your brain is going to save you so many traumas and dramas in your life. So somebody who comes up to you in work and they're all smiling and they're kind of telling you this and they're asking for your help, you step back and you go, are they trying to get something out of me that I'm not aware of? I don't want to be paranoid, but maybe maybe they're actually playing me in some way. They're getting me to do all the work, and then they're going to take the credit. Law number 7. I read that in Robert's book. I got to be aware of the fact that people might get me to do the work, and they're going to steal my ideas. All right, no, I'm going to step back. I'm not going to say no to this guy or this woman. I'm just going to say, let me think about it. And then you have a way, maybe you won't do it, etc. So that awareness is going to save you another really unpleasant experience. Never outshine the master. I've been fired twice for outshining the master before I wrote the book, right? I've heard so many stories of people getting fired and not realizing that's why they got fired. And that's not a very nice experience, to be fired and never know why you were fired. That could be really damaging.
Because no one's going to say that.
No.
Like, oh, you're fired because you're doing better than me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but being aware of that will save you from that kind of unpleasant experience. So most of the books are defensive, right? Okay, always say less than necessary. No, that's offensive. You need to stop talking so much because people perceive that as weakness. But that's not an evil law. That's something that that is common sense. If you're in a meeting and just blathering all about, you're going to say something stupid. You're going to appear like someone who has no self-control. So you don't have to be silent, but you have to speak less than you normally speak, right? So some of the laws and things in human nature as well are about that, where there are positive qualities that you can gain from the books. But a lot of it is being aware of what's going on in other people, not being so naive. And then in human nature, being aware of your own dark qualities, because our tendency, law number 1 of human nature, is to always blame the other person. Oh, they're a narcissist. Oh, they're aggressive. Oh, they're grandiose. Oh, they're the ones with the ego, etc. Not me. No, never. I'm an angel. I'm a saint. I'm pure. No, sorry. You're wrong. You have that dark side as much as anyone else. You are just as much have narcissistic tendencies. You have aggressive tendencies. You have envy as much as anyone, right? Some people, yes, have it more intensely and they act on it. That's true. But get off your high horse and look at yourself and be aware of your own negative qualities. And it's not to get angry or bitter or blame yourself. It's to be aware so you can control this behavior. Because if you think you're a saint, if you think you're the greatest social justice warrior on the planet, you're going to start saying things to people that are rude and offensive, and you're going to get yourself in trouble because you're not aware of all that negative energy that's roiling through you. So self-awareness will help prevent some of your own negative patterns. And then awareness of others' negativity will save you all of those stupid dramas, emotional dramas that you don't need to go through in life. That's my short answer.
No, that's great. So it's like, take the books, the human nature, the 48 laws of power, learn them, understand them, and then identify them in yourself, in others, and just use that information however it needs to be used best in that situation. And you can help yourself a lot in that situation. And you can also find flaws, which create a smarter, better you that can work out with other people in the world.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so incredible. And yeah, a lot of people don't like to talk about it because it's negative. I love how you talk about narcissism. Like, I'm definitely a functional narcissist. Like, sorry. Like, when I'm out to dinner, I don't put my spoon in the other person's mouth. I put it in my mouth. Like, everyone has to be naturally narcissistic. Like, I always hate when people say, oh, like, if you're narcissistic, I'm like, oh yeah, it's not negative. Like, yeah, I want to be the best. Like, I want to be great. Like, narcissism is such a negative connotation, but of course we're all narcissists. And then the people that, oh, I gave to charity, I'm such a good person, but you want credit for it. Like, exactly. I don't think there's a selfless act. I actually talked about this with someone before, and the only selfless act I could think of was a soldier like dying on a battlefield, because they're dead, so they can't feel the greatness. Anything else is like, you do it and it's something very selfless, but you feel good about it. Yeah. So it's like you're doing it for yourself. Yeah. And that's just how we are. Yeah. It's just we evolved as individuals. Yeah. Whew. That's amazing. I want to ask you, like, if you're working on anything next, but one thing I noticed, I don't know if anyone ever asked you this, I mean, they probably have, I'm sure, but on the covers of your books, not including the 50th law, they all have the shapes, right? Like the Law of Power has the line down the middle. Seduction's kind of like the similar, but a heart. There's Mastery has the triangles. Is there any rhyme or reason to those shapes?
Yeah, there is. I won't reveal them. I'll let you figure it out. Because if I tell you what they are, I spoil the effect. It's like you see something in the clouds, and everybody will interpret it in their own way, because there's sort of a vagueness to it, and you bring your own things there. So yeah, there's definitely an idea, a guiding idea behind it, but I'll let other people decide upon that.
Okay, I like it. And are you working
Yes,
on another book?
Yeah,
I'm sure you've got your questions your whole life. I'm sure people ask you. You are?
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna have to be a little bit of a narcissist in a minute, because I have to go and work on it. But
okay,
I have a book coming out in October called The Daily Laws. It's sort of, I don't know if you're familiar, if your audience is familiar with the book called The Daily Stoic that Ryan Holiday did. It's kind of a book where every day of the year has kind of a lesson in it. And so we've done that for my books. We're taking passages from the books, passages from blog posts, passages from podcasts, and we're putting it in every day of the year. So it's like a calendar that you open up, and each day has like a page of a thought that you're going to go through. And it's structured in a way so the first 3 months are teaching you about your career and mastery. And the next 3 months are schooling you about the people's manipulation and the power games. Then the next 3 months are about the arts of persuasion and how to influence people. And then in the end, we get towards human nature. And the last chapter is excerpts from my book that I'm writing right now. And each month is introduced with an essay, an original essay in which I kind of explain what this month is about through things that have happened to me personally. So that's new material. Some of it's material from my other books. A lot of it is, but some of it's new material. That's the book coming out in October called The Daily Laws.
I love the daily element, because it's like a little reminder every day, and it's important to remind yourself of this stuff.
Yeah.
And hey, I will buy it when it comes out. And if you wanna come on and promote it, you can come on anytime to the podcast.
It'll be out October 12th, by the way.
October 12th. All right, October 12th. I have that date in my head, and I'll remember. And oh man, this has been a pleasure. Like I already felt like I know you from reading so much of your work.
Well, you were gonna bring me out to Charleston at one point. Now I remember that whole conversation.
We were thinking about it. I just bought a new building for my business, and I have this area that I put aside. We don't actually have it set up great yet. If you would have said yes, that would have been probably the
I see. Well,
like the deadline or the enemy, and I would have had it ready.
With the whole stuff that's going on with the coronavirus, I'm not so keen on traveling right now.
Understood. But maybe next time we'll keep it in the loop. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for spreading all your wisdom. Thanks for writing all your books.
Oh, you're welcome, Sean.
And
my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right, everyone. This has been Robert Greene. Thanks for watching.